Welcome to the Chiefs. Ako po si Roby Alampay. Kasama ko po dito sa studio, Lingao of One News. Mamaya-maya sasamahan din tayo ni Ami Pamintuan. Ito na pala si Ami Pamintuan. She's joining us online from the port area in the offices of the Philippine Star. Chiefs.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Happy Tuesday.
Ano bang headline, Ami?
Well, lilabas na yung schedule ng school opening, no, August 22, and full face-to-face classes by November 2. Medyo natatakot yung ibang private school operators eh.
Oo, syempre kasi remind din natin, August 22 ang opening. In his inaugural speech, sabi ni President Marcos, not his inaugural speech, in his first press briefing, sabi ni President Marcos he wants to start face-to-face, facing it in starting September, full face-to-face by November. Ed, ano pang binabantayan natin?
Well, finally, a nominee for DNR, pero we're still waiting for a nominee for DOH of all departments, probably one of the more important departments at this point.
DNR is Maria Antonia Tony Yulo Loizaga.
Yeah, almost at Gonzaga.
But I think from the little that I've read, she's
With the Manila Observatory.
with the Manila Observatory, a
Of
trustee of Ateneo, and so on. And we'll have to know more. But ever since yesterday, kasi they've been careful with their nomination.
Nominees, they always brand them as nominees only, pending qualification of their qualifications.
At saka technical rules, di ba?
Yes, may vetting din.
In the meantime, of course, the big story today is it is the 6th anniversary of the historic Hague ruling, and we want to commemorate that. We want to talk to people who have been following this for the past 6 years. We have with us a Strat-based group founder, Dindo Manhit, and UP Institute of Maritime Affairs and the Law of the Sea Director, Attorney Jay Batongbacal. Dindo, Jay, welcome to the program. Welcome to the Chiefs.
Welcome, sirs.
Good evening.
Hi, good evening.
Jay, I want to start with you. I was having a conversation with Dindo kanina because Strat-based ADRI had a forum on this very matter. But we were talking 6 years ago. We remember where we were. We were at the Business World Economic Forum. And then we were wrapping up hapon na, which was of course morning, where the arbitral ruling comes up. How do you remember it? What was the emotion, and most importantly, what was the expectation, value, and hope behind this arbitral ruling?
Well, I remember it clearly. I was actually there at ABC5 no? at the time. Dun sa second floor niyo ba yun? And I was with the late Professor Baviera. No? So as they announced the ruling, no? They only had the executive summary yata, or the digest. No? And the points were trickling in one by one. It was being mentioned by the reporter. And I remember I and Eileen were really looking at each other, no? Parang raised eyebrows with every ruling that came out. As in, basically surprised din, no? Na, parang, wow, surprised na each and every point in favor at the time. Kasi nga, at the time, syempre, we weren't really that sure yet on how well the Philippines would do. And we were anticipating parang, okay, some win and loss situations with the 15 submissions. No? But when it came out na practically all, except for a few minor points, were won. No? Talagang we were quite surprised. No? And yun nga, it was really because of the extent of the victory that at the time we wondered paano yung sustainability nito, no? Especially within your administration that had already indicated some inclination basically towards China. And so the big question then was, as soon as came out, will the Philippines, under the new administration, the third administration, really be able to make use of this leverage, no? Or will it squander it? No? And then the years played out now afterwards.
And we remember, of course, over the past few years, just to summarize very quickly, Duterte did pursue, as he said, a policy of appeasement low point for this particular ruling was the President himself calling it a piece of paper. But literally towards the end of this administration, you had the Department of Foreign Affairs invoking it before the international community that this is something that we are invoking, that we are holding on to. Jay and Dindo, 6 years later, how do you gauge the value and the strength and the integrity of this ruling?
Probably si Dindo muna para.
From my end, Robbie, it outlasted, as we have predicted, the government of Duterte. That what we have really is a jurisprudence based on international law, based on a world where we have a rule-based international system. It's something that we should hold on to and build from there. And government, I've always taught this in class, in political science class, is that government does not last except with what the constitutional mandate that they have. But what we have is that the state, the concept of the state, the concept of the Filipino nation that comes with the state, outlasts any government. And right now, we continue to hold this arbitral victory. And we hope that a new government, this government of Marcos Jr., looks at it, learns from the lessons of the past, and builds on that. And I'm quite surprised and also happy that we have a strong statement from the Department of Foreign Affairs this morning.
Well, gentlemen, let me quote from the President himself. He said, "We will not allow a single millimeter of our maritime, coastal, and up to 200 kilometers rights to be trampled upon. We will talk to China consistently with a firm voice. There is no wiggle room here. Our sovereignty is sacred. We will not compromise it in any way." So, pretty strong words coming from the new president. But in real terms, what do we expect, or what should we expect to see in terms of words and actions? I mean, let's talk about actions, because these are already words. Because people do remember 2015, Duterte saying, "I will jet ski." So those are words. In terms of actions, what should we expect?
Joke only.
Qualified later on. But what should we expect in terms of concrete actions?
Well, syempre, the proof will be in the pudding, no? At least we can say that they started off on a strong foot this time, no? This current administration, by issuing that statement. And it's a very good and strong statement, as you mentioned. No? With respect to what actions will then follow this statement, that's what we have to watch out for. No? So far, there are some key issues and events. No? One, of course, is with respect to Ayungin Shoal, where the BRP Sierra Madre is. China is really focusing its efforts, its pressure around that particular feature. And we've seen in the news recently na it's reaching a point where they're even able to interfere with the resupply operations, which supposedly was a red line under the previous administration. No? But we don't know if it's regarded as such by the new administration. So some clarification perhaps on that point will be forthcoming, no? As the following resupply missions roll in. No? And then the other issue, of course, is with respect to joint exploration and development, which the previous administration, despite all of its bravado in the first few years, no, parang wala rin palang nangyari, and then they even announced the complete termination of those talks, no, leaving the current administration essentially possibly with a free hand on how to go about it, how to handle it, no. We do not yet have any indication as well as to exactly what particular direction or what particular policy positions it will take or it will push during this renewal of discussions. No? So yun siguro kailangan lang nating bantayan sa ngayon. And then, of course, you have to pay attention to the fishing activity naman in the West Philippine Sea, because that is the one that really this time has become a popular issue. No? In my discussions with people from the coastal communities in Zambales, Pangasinan, Bataan, talagang damang-dama na nila. And so with this kind of parang grassroots advocacy na is growing, no? Unlike 20 years ago na parang this is a fringe topic for academics or foreign policy specialists, no? But now really I think it's becoming a critical issue for our coastal communities.
Well,
Yes,
we
sir.
heard strong words from President Marcos, but the question from the start has always been compliance by China and how to enforce this ruling, di ba? Are you seeing any change at all in the way Beijing will deal with the Philippines under this new administration with regard to the West Philippine Sea?
We will not see it, Ami, until we build a position of strength. And the position of strength will only be built if we build alliances and partnerships that we have. In this situation is that the reality that in this rule-based international order, there's a constituency. There are big countries with powers of their own ready to support us. But the position of weakness that we saw in the previous administration weakened. I always hear it from them. Why will we fight for something that your government does not like to stand in? But with the strong position of President Marcos, I think it's a step forward. If they will consistently push it, I still believe it's positive. It will happen, and we should consistently encourage our government that in our reality that we are a small nation, maybe it's time to build that alliance, and we continue to track this. Even ordinary Filipinos across sector accepts the reality that as a small nation, we can build on that. And 85%, 84 to 85% as of June this year, consistent the past 6 years, that they would like government to build that alliance, to work on partnership with existing strong democratic nations that share the value of a rule-based international system.
And
So
you-
hopefully we can learn from the past 6 years that we cannot treat this as bilateral. Maybe bilateral, work with smaller countries, broaden our alliances to the point that the multilateral world will support us.
And you think the new administration has a better appreciation of the need to go multilateral in approaching this issue?
With the appointment of career diplomats into the position of the Foreign Affairs Secretary Manalo, a newly retired General Faustino becoming acting secretary or OIC in the Department of Defense, I think they would learn the lessons, Annie, of the past 6 years and build from that. And we know where their heart is. At the end of the day, government exists for the Filipino people, which is a Philippine national interest. And learn from that, build on that. At the end, we protect our interests.
Dindo and Jay, as you said, no, learn our lessons. One of the things that we've already touched on was the policy of the Duterte administration to pursue appeasement as something to approach China with. Remind us and flesh that out for us. What went so wrong with appeasement? What was China's response to this strategy?
Well, I think it's pretty clear, probably still fresh in the minds of our people. No, from the very beginning, August or October 2016, President Duterte came around and was bannering this $24 billion worth of promises, and then for the following year or 2 years, he kept saying that he needed China. He was going to get a lot of infrastructure from China, a lot of financial assistance from China, etc., etc. And for that reason, he was basically accommodating China at every turn when it came to the West Philippine Sea. He gave China everything they wanted. Our silence about the arbitration, not raising it within ASEAN, not talking about it with other countries. They got everything, no? And because of that, there was absolutely no interference, no howl from us as they built up and improved their artificial islands in the West Philippine Sea. There was no the government was even providing the excuses at one point, acting as China's spokesperson when it came to the oppression of our Philippine fishermen. No, we were being told na it was enough that they were allowed to fish outside Scarborough Shoal, for example, no, not paying attention to the fact that the fishing ground is inside the shoal, and that our fishermen were also losing out to thousands of Chinese fishing vessels in the rest of the West Philippine Sea. No? And after 4 or 5 years, even DBM, even NEDA were saying that that China's supposed financial aid was very slow and wasn't coming. No? And in the end, by the end of 6 years, we still have only 2 bridges, maybe both loans, both controversial. Two bridges and then two loans, both controversials for dams, and then a project that did not even break ground during the Duterte administration. All of that in exchange for the West Philippine Sea, essentially. No? So it was really quite a bad deal. We gave them a lot in exchange for failed promises.
Yes, sir. Well, sir, Mr. Manhit, of course, building alliances does make sense kasi you do want to expand and broaden the base of an alliance and bring in other countries. But my question is, by its very nature, wouldn't an alliance also have its own kind of inertia? Of course, expecting other governments to act on a certain issue does take some time. But in the immediate term, what should government do, if anything at all, in terms of immediate action whenever, for example, there's another resupply of Ayungin Shoal at harangan ulit ang ating tropa doon? And other things like our fishermen hinaharangan.
There's no inertia, Ed, no, because at the end of the day, it's the lack of initiative by our own government to encourage sport. Countries have encouraged us to do joint patrols. Countries have encouraged us to be part of broader military exercise. And we have seen the region has become very active. The growth of what we call the Quad Plus, even. No? A simple dialogue that was actually started by the late Prime Minister Abe of Japan now is defining the security relationship. Or even the AUKUS, Australia, UK, US, and even the interests of the EU. Imagine if we take those concerns and they share our victory. They share the value that what they want is a rule-based international system. It's up for our own government to reach out to this country and tell them we are ready to stand up for what we have won 6 years ago and build from that. But we cannot do that if we cannot ask countries to stand up for us if we're not standing for our own interests.
Yeah. Well, they didn't necessarily stand up for us, but you have countries in our neighborhood like Vietnam, Malaysia, Indonesia. They were standing up for their own interests, but they were invoking this quote-unquote piece of paper as well. What did that do for the ruling? And at the same time, what did that do to our standing in the neighborhood?
Imagine when you have your ASEAN maritime neighbors using our ruling to support their own argument. It basically strengthens us more. But you cannot expect them to stand up for us if we are weak in our own position. So I've always argued that let's build on a position of strength. Bilateral is good for investment, trade discussions, but we know for a fact that our strong trade and investment partners is not China. Then use and encourage these countries to work with us, to build on us, and really maybe move to the next stage of joint patrol, ensuring peace and stability and respect for international law in the region, in the West Philippine Sea, in the broader South China Sea area.
Jay, what's the opportunity for the international community? I mean, in growing concentric circles, the opportunity for ASEAN, the opportunity for the Quad, as they're calling it, and the opportunity for the international community in general.
Well, there are indeed quite a lot, no? And as you mentioned, no, in concentric circles, these are different levels. No? If anything, really, the passage of 6 years has only shown that the ruling has gotten stronger because more and more countries have expressly invoked it and pointed to it and used it basically to push back against China's claims and China's positions. And I'm sure that China cannot really ignore it, the fact that it is a source of strength. No? Now, within ASEAN, that means that it can form the basis of unity, which is something that China is always quite suspicious of. No, because ASEAN unity is viewed as a potential threat to it, and that's why a coalition that is created within the region around the ruling on any point, whether it's only just the EEZ or to the full implementation of international will be a cause of concern for China, and that means that we can generate leverage, no? Not only for ourselves but also for other nations, each one. And then with respect to external countries that are forming, yung mga Quad and AUKUS and things like that, the ruling actually serves as a basis also for common interests. No, it serves as a link between the region and external countries, so that they may join together to protect common interests. No, and we have to acknowledge that we might have many interests. Some of them might diverge, but when it comes to the freedom of the seas, the usage of the oceans, the rights and entitlements of all states, that was supposedly settled long ago when we signed and ratified UNCLOS. No? So dapat tapos na yan. And now with the ruling very clearly applying and interpreting it in the South China Sea, it really creates a common interest among all these regional and extra-regional countries to push, no? To protect certain high seas freedoms, and to respect the allocation of rights to natural resources in this area, which is now being subject to quite a lot of competition, especially between China and the rest of the region.
You think outside the region, you think we should reach out more to countries in Europe, for example, like France and the UK are interested in increasing their presence within the region, right?
Yes, definitely, because they have been the ones actually reaching out to us.
Yes.
No? And the problem was during the past 6 years, the government was the one that stayed silent, no, or which did not respond to these requests. I remember, for example, one ambassador telling me that they had repeatedly reached out to the government to talk about certain things that they could do together in the South China Sea, but there was no response, no, because the policy was basically keep silent and just keep appeasing China.
But I think the idea is the government didn't want to rub it in. When you're dealing with China, you want to give them face. I mean, that's the reasoning behind that, no? Constructive engagement, critical engagement. You think we should also pursue the tack at the same time? Is it possible?
Yeah. Well, I think allowing the other side to save face does not necessarily mean you give in to everything that they demanded and you accommodate each and every one of their demands, while they are the ones also coming in and taking every advantage that they can from you. No, so whether or not they save face, whether or not it is rubbing it in, is really now a matter of diplomacy, no? And that's where the professional diplomats come in. That's why it's very important for us to have a diplomatic corps that is really professional, and that the foreign policy is run and dictated or run and implemented by professional diplomats instead of some populist leader basically preempting everything, no? And on the basis of that these flamboyant statements, no, making it appear that he has already established the national position and the policy and and that he reflects the opinion of the population.
But sir, in the immediate term, how should our armed forces, how should our Bureau of Fisheries now act when our people are challenged in these areas? I mean, what should we expect from government as far as these are concerned?
We need to put also resources to support our own capacity building. And I think we need to look at the capacities of our Coast Guards. And you'll be surprised that we have support from Japan, for example, to improve the capacities. We have support from other countries to improve also the capacities of our Navy and also even our own Bureau of Fisheries. No? So we need government to allocate resources to strengthen our position. We cannot speak of things when we don't put resources on it. So it's something that you look at government today, it's a start of a new government, it's a start of new policies. Learning from the past tells you that it's good to invest in these things, considering that there's a broad support from the Filipino people. So that's what I hope to happen in the next few years, learning and investing in the capacity to protect our territory, protect our resources, protect the fishermen who generate income from these resources, marine resources.
Yes, sir. Pero sir, in the end, sir, di ba, in the end, the policy in Manila will have to be reflected in whatever event happens over there to the west. Di ba? So my question has to do with that din eh. Na in the end, what should we expect of our armed forces, our Navy, our Coast Guard, and our BIFAR in terms of engaging? Maybe engaging is the wrong word. In terms of interacting with the Chinese.
Well, we should probably expect really professional and firm interaction, no? Really asserting our jurisdictions in these areas, and not, withdrawing at the sight of any China Coast Guard vessel, even if they're bigger and more powerful. No, we should be very confident that we are the ones who are in the right. No, we are the ones who are acting in accordance with law, and we should always call them out whenever they act contrary to international norms. No, such as when the Coast Guard revealed earlier this year that the China Coast Guard was moving or maneuvering contrary to call regs. No? Those kinds of instances really should be made of public record, no? And that the appropriate actions, such as diplomatic notes and the occasional report to the public, should always be made. No? Because kahit papano, this will have an impact as well on how China views us, whether we're going to continue to be a pushover or whether they will begin to actually respect it when they see Philippine Navy, Coast Guard, or BIFAR ships trying to patrol our waters.
Whether or not they see it as a pushover, it brings me back to another question on the ruling itself, Jay. And I wanted to ask you, but of course, Dindo, jump in if you want to expound. But Jay, kanina I asked Dindo, what did we lose over the past 6 years by not invoking this ruling early enough, or for that matter, speaking against it? And Dindo said, look, the integrity is there of the ruling, we lost time. And then I asked our defense editor, Manny Mugato, sabi ni Manny, we also lost a lot of opportunities and we actually handicapped ourselves in certain things we want to do. But you're a student of international law as well. As far as the ruling is concerned, other than time and opportunity, did we actually damage or weaken this asset, this platform, this potential weapon that we had?
Well, we certainly lost time, opportunity, and also leverage, no? Because especially during the first few years of the Duterte administration, the fact that they would not invoke it, and then later on we're also joining China in disparaging the ruling, no? Really, in a way, weakened our abilities to make use of it credibly, no, as an instrument of leverage, no? Kasi, syempre, China will see it na in there. Even you don't believe in it, so why should we believe you if you were going to invoke it before the UN? That's probably just for show, ganon, no? So in that sense, during that time, no, we lost leverage and the ability to apply that leverage at the right time and opportunity, no? Such as when we were chair of ASEAN, no? That could have been our best opportunity. Other claimants in littoral states, no, in coming to grips with how to deal with China in a kind of consistent and uniform manner. And because we didn't do that, no, ayan, yung code of conduct negotiations is still an 11-party negotiation where the biggest, most powerful party can easily divide and conquer the rest, no? Whereas it should be China on one side and then ASEAN, or at the very least the South China Sea claimants on the other, no? So we lost that, I think, no? With respect to now the us returning, basically recognizing now the power of this document, this piece of paper, according to some people, no? I think it really shows that it's best use, the power of this piece of paper really lies in our perspective and how we use it, how we see it as a source of leverage. And if we have smart diplomats and smart policy, we can really make full use of it in our subsequent interactions now with China.
But Dindo, going back to that point that we had earlier about losing time, I guess another way to phrase that question is, any permanent damage?
None that I see of, but we need to move forward, take this opportunity of a change of government, and really negate what we have lost, the time, the opportunity, and the leverage mentioned by Dr. Jay. We need to move now from a position of weakness to a position of strength. And from this position of strength, see ourselves as a sovereign nation with strong hold on, based on international law, and generate enough support for our claim. I would not like to use the word disputed, as I've said in our discussion, Robbie, earlier, that we are not disputed. We have the court of law telling the world, speaking about this arbitral ruling, and build from that. And in the end, countries will support that, because what they want is a rule-based international order. And in this rule-based international order, that's what we're seeing also. The conflict around the world could be settled if people will simply respect rules, respect of sovereignty of nations, respect of their territory. And that's what we should hold on and build on.
Well, speaking of, you mentioned asserting our rights. Paano kapag binobomba tayo ng water cannon? Should our Coast Guard or our Navy respond also with our own water cannon? Anong proper response doon?
You know, I remember, Ami, remember how the previous government of Aquino, just when Taiwanese fishermen crossing our territory, diba? Executes our own laws based on our rights. That's an example of weakness. When countries like Japan help us modernize our Coast Guard, and we still don't do anything. So for me, there are countries that are willing to help us in different ways. Joint patrols, modernizing our Coast Guard, improving the capacity of our Navy. So it's time to look at that and really move forward from this appeasement and weak strategy that we've had in the previous Duterte administration. So a policy change is what we need. And the policy change, I believe, in my own interaction within our own military and Coast Guard establishment, they're just waiting for that because that's what they want to stand for. It's something that they believe is the Philippine national interest.
And you think we'll see that policy change under a new administration?
We see that with the statement of President Bongbong Marcos Jr. pre-inauguration. I saw that this morning with a strong statement of DFA Secretary Manalo. As of course, these are words. Now the challenge is let's turn these words into actions. And if these actions are not strong enough, given the way our strong neighbor sees us, I always go back. The concept of a joint patrol was being worked on by our own government with our own allies, with our own partners. So why not revisit that? Will they do a water cannon when there are friends from Japan, US, and Australia patrolling and ensuring a free and open Indo-Pacific? Maybe not. But a small country and your own president telling it's just a piece of paper, I'm weak. So we will be pushed around. We will be bullied. So we need to position ourselves in the interest of the Philippine national interest is about standing up for what is ours and what is right in the eyes of international law.
Well, sir, certainly striking down the 9-dash line was a victory for the Philippines. But let me ask you as well about another aspect of the tribunal ruling. If I read it correctly, the tribunal also ruled that the structures in the Spratly Islands are not really islands per se. They're basically just rocks because they cannot sustain community independently. I'm wondering how that affects the status of the islands that we have, well, the islands and coasts that we have over there, like for example, Pagasa Island or Calayan Island.
No effect really, because this distinction between rocks and islands is a legal distinction. Okay, it does not necessarily follow that when you name an island, it will be also treated as an island in international law. I mean, that's not unusual. the law often gives its own definition or its own meaning to words that we use in an ordinary sense. No? Insofar as the Calayan Island Group is concerned, the status of our sovereignty over our islands and rocks, whether you call them a rock or island, doesn't matter. The point is we have sovereignty over those pieces of land and the territorial sea around them. So we should always stick to that. There have been quite a number of opinions being circulated that somehow the tribunal's decision affected that, even voided our claim. These are all wrong. These are all completely missing the point that the tribunal's decision deals only with the maritime disputes, meaning the status of the waters around these islands, and did not touch the issue of sovereignty over the islands and rocks and their territorial seas.
Okay. Jay Batongbacal and Dindo Manhit, maraming salamat po sa inyo.
Thank you.
Thank you, sirs.
Thank you. Welcome.
And we'll start up another conversation after a quick break. Stay right there. The Chiefs will be right back.
Back to the Chiefs, the peso is almost at an all-time low on the heels of a soaring inflation rate. Business World columnist and Foundation for Economic Freedom President Calixto Chikiamco makes sense of it for us. Good evening, sir, and welcome to the Chiefs.
Magandang gabi po.
Good evening. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you, sir, for joining us. Sir, of course, everybody's looking at the peso-dollar exchange rate. Almost hit another all-time low today. Almost lang naman, almost. But in the end, what it boils down to is everybody's asking, anong epekto nitong paglalaro ng peso-dollar doon sa presyo ng bilihin? In the end, bulsa ng Pilipinong, pambili ng Pilipino ang punto eh.
Well, in terms of inflation, of course, there's some secondary effects from the weaker peso because, of course, we pay for our oil and some of our imports in dollars. But again, we have to look at the whole thing. The peso is, in fact, has strengthened against some other currencies, including Japan. Japan has depreciated considerably more against the US dollar than we have.
Yes, sir.
Again, I think, how you view it depends on where you stand. If
Yes,
you're
sir.
an OFW, certainly the weaker peso is a blessing for you. You have a more disposable income. If you're an exporter, again, it's a positive. But of course, if you have high imports, in a business in which you are very dependent on imports, then the falling peso is a cause for concern.
Yes, sir. Well, in an earlier interview with Winnie Monsod, I think it was last week, when we were talking to her, she was saying na the other way of looking at it nga is that, it's something that should encourage exporters to go on the offensive of sorts. Pero yes, sir, yeah, that's the other thing din eh. You're looking at only one sector, but what about the general population?
Oh, well, I said, in the general population, they will feel it in terms of higher prices, especially for those with imported inputs. But the central bank has made a study, and the pass-on effect is only about 0.4%. No, so for every 1 peso, 1%, 1 peso is only 0.4. It adds only 0.4% to the inflation rate. It's of course the central bank has to do a balancing act. On one hand, of course, there's the inflation. The other, of course, problem is, we're just coming out from a pandemic, and therefore you don't want to kill, the economy with too high in interest rates.
Yeah, but to that point, sir, you agree with the central bank decision and direction not to intervene and not to try to protect the peso?
Well, I think when you ask the central bank, they will say that they're not doing exchange rate targeting. They're just doing inflation targeting, and they will focus on the inflation rate rather than protecting the peso. So I think the central bank has chosen to have a gradualist approach, although they have already signaled that they will increase interest rates maybe by 100 basis points in order to arrest inflation, not the exchange rate in particular.
Yeah, but I think just 2 weeks ago, they were saying that, one thing we can try to do, at least with all of these external factors, is at least provide some environment of predictability. To that point, just 2 weeks ago, they were saying we'll probably have 2 rounds of interest rates, no bigger than 25 basis points. Then last week, they said, baka 50. Now we're talking about 100. What's going on?
Well, I think, they're afraid of, the inflation expectations being unanchored. That means, this will create inflationary expectations, and therefore maybe labor will demand higher wages, and of course, companies will try to pass on those higher prices. So I think they want to. That's why they made a switch, I think, toward a more aggressive policy in view of the higher inflation rate. I think that's about 6-something%, and also the expectations based on their surveys.
Well, there are analysts who are saying the Philippine peso will be one of the worst performing currencies in Asia until 2024. Do you think that's an accurate forecast?
Well, relative to the US dollar, I guess it may be true, but it's not something to worry about. As I said, there are positive aspects to having a weaker peso. So, and at the same time, as against other currencies, it has not really depreciated that much. So, I wouldn't worry too much about it. In fact, sometimes as a strategy, you want to adopt really an undervalued currency in order to, of course, promote your exports. And, we've been talking about protection, especially for our farmers, for these imports. Well, a weaker peso will provide them some kind of protection.
Well, the problem is this is happening when fuel prices are surging, and of course our fuel is imported, our petroleum product. We have to pay dollars for it, and then it's happening with Russia still fighting Ukraine, and it's affecting our fertilizer, our animal feed, and all of this. These are also imported. And people are seeing the impact of this on food inflation, fuel inflation. You think it's not a cause for serious concern, immediate term, on inflation?
Those are cost push factors, and interest rates will not have too much an effect on cost push factors. It will not make the problem with Russia go away, right? by having a higher interest rates. Of course, you can kill the economy. You can really soften demand so much that you can moderate it a bit, because you cannot moderate it a lot, because those are cost push factors.
In the meantime, how do you imagine and picture it on the ground when it comes to, let's say, a small entrepreneur? We're trying to reopen the economy. We're trying to encourage people. The pressures are coming from all sides. Raw materials are high. Inflation is high. Once you get into some kind of a business, there's pressure for wages to be regular and at the same time, ideally higher, and so on. How do you imagine it on the ground in the case of entrepreneurs either starting or restarting? What is all of this? What is the effect of all of this on the psyche of local investment?
I don't know. I guess it depends on, if you have imported competition, it will give you protection, right? I mean, your competition will have to raise their prices, and it's an opportunity for you to be able to grab market share. So it's, again, not necessarily a bad thing. Of course, everybody's suffering from these high prices, whether those are food or fuel. It's a global phenomenon. It's not unique to the Philippines. So what do you expect the government to do in that sense? In fact, what they're trying to do now is, of course, to have targeted social subsidies, and I think that's what they should double down on. To give targeted assistance to those who are most affected.
I think the government should seriously consider imposing new taxes or increasing some taxes.
Well, I agree that we should increase some taxes, but again, it should be phased, implementation, and it depends on what kind of taxes. Again, you don't want, at the time that we are trying to just get out of the pandemic and our economy is recovering, you don't want to kill that recovery by imposing taxes, right? So, I'm for a phased implementation of taxes. For example, I agree with a digital transaction tax, especially if you want to tax, advertisers like Facebook or Google that have been escaping all those taxes. So, yes, we should really impose some taxes, especially that will help the government raise some money for their ambitious BBB program. But again, it should be phased.
What about, sir, taxes like yung proposal ng DOF, at least the previous DOF, na expanding the base of the value-added tax that hits a lot more people, as well adding 1 peso to the excise tax on fuel by next year?
Well, again, the problem there is to really hit the poor, who are already suffering from high food prices and high transport prices. So I don't think, again, it's a question of timing. It's the beauty of course, that is its simplicity and its universality. But again, you shouldn't be doing it now when we are, the economy is facing this kind of difficult situation.
We're a couple of weeks away from the first State of the Nation address of President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. People, of course, listened in on his inaugural address. That was a statement of vision. People are waiting for a little more detail when it comes to the SONA. What would you like to see and hear at the SONA?
Well, there are many things, because there are many still problems that former President Duterte left behind. No, for example, in terms of energy security, what's the roadmap to achieve energy security? Because right now we're experiencing very thin reserves. So that's one problem that's to be addressed. The other problem is, of course, education. We are falling behind our Asian peers. One study said that we're even 5 years behind our Asian peers in terms of our students, and we have, not resumed face-to-face classes. So what are we going to do in order to catch up with our Asian peers in terms of education? Because that will, be critical for our economic development, especially in the long term, having a skilled labor force. What's the roadmap for agriculture? It's nice to say that we're going to be self-reliant, but at what cost? And secondly, we have to face the fact that in the short term, domestic supply is really not enough. Of course, this is a problem of what? 30 years in the making. It's we have our agriculture sector is underperformed in terms of population growth. So it's not a new thing, but what's the roadmap so that we can increase agriculture productivity? That's what I want to see.
Paul, do you have any suggestions for the short term to improve food security, for example?
Well,
What would you like to see?
I would like to see liberalization of agricultural imports. People are saying we shouldn't be doing that, but let's again face the fact we don't produce enough. So in order to tamper down inflation, let's liberalize, let's abolish the quantitative restrictions on agricultural products, specifically corn, sugar, chicken, pork, and let's reduce the tariff rate to something like 10%, and use part of the tariff rate, like in the rice certification law, to improve our competitiveness. In the long term, we have to change the structure of our agriculture from traditional small-scale agriculture to one that is more capitalistic, more commercial farming oriented. And this would need that we have to amend the agrarian reform law, because agrarian reform law has led to land fragmentation and farmers holding very uneconomical 1 hectare or less. You simply cannot modernize farming with land sizes of 1 hectare.
Okay. Mr. Chikiamco, sir, maraming salamat po.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Calixto Chikiamco, of course, is a Business World columnist and president of the Foundation for Economic Freedom. And that is it for the Chiefs today. We hope we keep the conversation going. Mask on, wash hands, stay safe, Philippines. Ako po si Roby Alampay.
I'm Ami Pamintuan of the Philippine Star.
I'm Ed Lingao. We are One News, all sides, all the time.
Na ako.